Dmitry Volkov had 3 seconds to decide. Through his scope, crosshairs centered on the German medic's forehead, fingers steady on the trigger of his Mosin Nagant. But when she turned, blonde hair catching the dying light of Stalingrad's burning skyline, something in her eyes made his world stop. Because pulling that trigger would save Russian lives, but not pulling it would haunt him forever. What would you do? The metallic scent of blood mixed with smoke as Dmitry pressed his eye to the scope. Stalingrad, October 1942. The city that had become a graveyard for armies. He'd earned his reputation the hard way, 147 confirmed kills in 8 months. Each shot precise. Each death necessary. The Germans called snipers like him rat-catchers. He called himself a guardian angel for Soviet soldiers who never make it home otherwise. But this shot was different. The German medic moved between wounded soldiers with practiced efficiency. Red Cross armband bright against her winter coat. She couldn't be more than 25, same age as his sister Katya back in Moscow. The sister who died in the first bombardment. Take the shot, Volkov. Sergeant Petrov's whisper cut through the October wind. She's treating their wounded. Making them fight ready again. Dmitry's finger found the trigger. Standard procedure. Enemy medics weren't protected by Geneva Convention rules, not in this war. Not in this hell. Through his scope, he watched her work. Gentle hands checking pulses. Whispering comfort to dying boys who'd probably never wanted this war either. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd studied medicine before the war, 2 years at Moscow University before Hitler's invasion changed everything. Now instead of saving lives, he ended them. 1 bullet at a time. Volkov. Petrov's voice carried warning. Command wants this sector cleared. She's the last target. But as Dmitry steadied his aim, the medic looked up. Directly at his position 300 meters away. She couldn't see him, impossible at this distance, through camouflage netting. Yet her eyes seemed to find his through the scope. Blue eyes. Not the cold blue of winter steel, but the warm blue of summer skies he remembered from childhood. Eyes that held no hatred, even here in this wasteland of war. His finger trembled on the trigger. A German soldier cried out, leg shattered by shrapnel. The medic moved toward him immediately, exposing herself completely to Dmitry's line of fire. Perfect shot. Clean kill. She's saving the enemy, Petrov hissed. That soldier will live to kill more Russians. Dmitry knew the sergeant was right. War had no room for mercy. Every enemy soldier saved meant more Soviet boys in wooden boxes. But watching her work, seeing the way she cradled the wounded boy's head, spoke soft words he couldn't hear but could feel, something cracked inside his chest. The crosshairs centered on her temple. Wind speed, negligible. Range, 287 meters. Elevation, slight adjustment needed. Everything he'd been trained for pointed to one action. He exhaled slowly. Finger tightened. And missed. Deliberately. The bullet sparked off concrete 2 feet to her left. She startled, looked around quickly, then continued working. Damn wind, Dmitry muttered, meeting Petrov's suspicious stare. Wind hasn't moved in 10 minutes. Then I missed. It happens. But it didn't happen. Not to Dmitry Volkov. Not ever. That night, guilt hammered against Dmitry's ribs like bullets on steel. In the bunker beneath Stalingrad's ruins, he cleaned his rifle by candlelight, while other snipers slept. He'd compromised his mission. Betrayed his country. All for a woman whose name he didn't even know. Can't sleep? Dmitry looked up. Senior Lieutenant Anna Kozlova stood in the doorway, her own sniper rifle slung across her shoulder. The most feared female sniper in the 284th Regiment. 83 confirmed kills and counting. The German medic, she said, settling beside him. Petrov told me what happened. Dmitry's hand stilled on the rifle bolt. I missed. You've never missed a shot that mattered. Anna's voice held no judgment, just curiosity. What was different about her? He couldn't explain it. How do you tell your commanding officer that in the middle of the war's most brutal battle, you'd seen humanity in an enemy's eyes. Nothing, he lied. Anna studied his face in the candlelight. My brother died at Minsk. Shot by a German sniper while trying to help wounded comrades. Every time I look through my scope, I see his face. She stood, rifle in hand. Tomorrow, that medic returns to the same sector. Command wants her eliminated. This time, Senior Lieutenant, you don't get to miss. Dawn came gray and cold over Stalingrad's skeletal remains. Dmitri took position in a different location, closer this time. Orders were orders. Through his scope, he watched the aid station come alive. German soldiers moved with the exhausted efficiency of men who'd been fighting too long. But she was there again. The medic. This time, he noticed details that made his throat tighten. The way she paused before entering the aid station, taking a deep breath like she was gathering courage. The silver locket at her throat that caught the light when she bent over patients. The fact that she flinched every time artillery thundered in the distance. She was afraid. Just like everyone else in this nightmare. Range, 220 meters. He whispered to himself. Wind northeast minimal. Perfect conditions for a perfect shot. But as he watched, a wounded German soldier, barely 18, reached up and grasped her hand. She smiled and spoke softly, and the boy's face relaxed for the first time since Dmitri had been watching. The same gentle expression his sister Katya had worn when comforting their grandmother during her final illness. What would you do? Dmitri found himself asking the empty air. The answer came from an unexpected source. Soviet artillery opened up at 14:30, targeting German positions 3 blocks east. In the chaos that followed, buildings collapsing, soldiers running for cover, the medic's aid station was abandoned. All except for one patient. A German officer with a chest wound, unconscious and alone. Dmitri watched through his scope as she made a choice that changed everything. Instead of evacuating with her unit, she stayed. Alone. Defenseless. Protecting one wounded enemy soldier who would probably die anyway. The shelling moved closer. Debris rained down on the aid station's roof. Any rational person would have run. She didn't run. Through his scope, Dmitri saw her lips moving. Praying, maybe? Or just talking to the unconscious officer, letting him know he wasn't dying alone. That's when Dmitri understood. She wasn't just a German medic. She was what he'd been before the war stole his soul, a healer. Someone who saw human beings instead of uniforms. Someone who still believed in saving lives rather than taking them. As the artillery barrage ended and silence settled over the ruins, Dmitri made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was going to save her. But everything was about to change. The next morning brought news that reframed everything Dmitri thought he knew. Intelligence reports, Anna announced, spreading photographs across the bunker's makeshift table. The German medic you've been tracking. Dmitri's blood turned to ice water. The photograph showed his target, but not in a medical station. She wore a German uniform without the Red Cross armband, standing next to a high-ranking SS officer. The intelligence brief identified her as Greta Müller, daughter of Oberfuhrer Heinrich Müller, architect of the ethnic cleansing operations in occupied territories. She's not just a medic, Anna continued. She's the daughter of a war criminal. And according to intercepted communications, she's gathering intelligence on Soviet positions while treating wounded. The room tilted around Dmitri. Everything he believed about her, the gentle healer, the woman who stayed with dying soldiers, had been a lie. Command wants her alive if possible, Anna said. She could provide valuable intelligence about German operations. Dmitri stared at the photograph. The same blue eyes that had stopped his finger on the trigger. The same hands that had cradled wounded boys' heads. But now he knew the truth. She was the enemy. The daughter of a monster. And he'd been protecting her. That night, Dmitri approached Anna with a proposal that surprised them both. I want to capture her myself. Anna looked up from cleaning her rifle. Why? Because I missed my shot. This is my responsibility. It wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was more complicated, a tangle of guilt, attraction, and something he couldn't name. But Anna didn't need to know that. Capture missions are dangerous, she warned. One mistake and you're dead. Or worse, captured yourself. Then come with me. The words hung between them in the candlelit bunker. Anna had never partnered with another sniper. Her reputation was built on working alone, trusting no one. But after a long moment, she nodded. We do this my way. Professional. Clean. No heroics. Agreed. They began planning immediately. The aid station's location, guard rotations, escape routes. Everything had to be perfect. But as they worked, Dmitri couldn't shake the image of Greta's eyes through his scope. The way she'd look directly at him, as if she could see through steel and stone to the man beneath. Which choice do you think they should make? The mission parameters changed again 48 hours later. New intelligence, Lieutenant Colonel Baddock announced during the morning briefing. The German medic isn't just gathering information, she's planning something. Tomorrow night, she's meeting with Wehrmacht officers to discuss a counteroffensive that could break our positions. He spread a map across the table. Red marks indicated Soviet positions. Black arrows showed planned German attacks. If this offensive succeeds, we lose Stalingrad. The war could turn. The weight of it settled on Dmitri's shoulders like lead. This wasn't about one woman anymore. It was about the entire Eastern Front. Your orders have changed, Batyuk continued. Capture is no longer the priority. Elimination is. Dmitri's mouth went dry. Sir, she could still provide valuable intelligence. She's too dangerous to risk. You have 48 hours. As the briefing ended, Anna caught Dmitri's arm. This changes everything, she whispered. No capture mission. No taking prisoners. Just clean elimination. But that night, alone in his position overlooking the aid station, Dmitri watched Greta work by lamplight. Same gentle movements. Same careful attention to each patient. Either she was the most accomplished actress he'd ever seen, or the intelligence reports were wrong. And tomorrow night he'd have to kill her to find out which. The meeting was set for midnight in the ruins of the old cathedral, close enough to German lines for security, isolated enough for secrets. Dmitri and Anna took positions at opposite ends of the building. 2 snipers, 2 angles, no chance of escape. At 23:47, Greta arrived alone. She moved through the rubble carefully, medical bag in one hand, flashlight in the other. Every few steps, she paused to listen. Professional caution or natural fear, Dmitri couldn't tell. At 23:52, German officers began arriving. 3 men in Wehrmacht uniforms, speaking in low, urgent tones. Dmitri centered his crosshairs on Greta's profile. Range, 180 meters. Wind calm. Perfect shot. But something was wrong. Through his scope, he watched the meeting unfold. Instead of sharing intelligence, Greta was arguing with the officers. Her body language screamed tension, fear, even defiance. One officer grabbed her arm roughly. She jerked away, speaking rapidly in German that Dmitri couldn't understand but could hear, desperate, pleading. Then he saw the silver locket at her throat catch the moonlight as she opened it. She showed the contents to the officers, and their expressions changed from anger to something like pity. That's when Dmitri realized the horrible truth. She wasn't a willing collaborator. She was being coerced. The breakthrough came at 0:17. One of the German officers slapped Greta across the face, hard enough that she staggered. As she fell, the locket spilled open, its contents visible even through Dmitri's scope. A photograph. 2 children, maybe 8 and 10 years old, smiling at the camera. Her children. Everything clicked into place. The fear in her eyes. The reluctant meetings. The way she'd looked directly at his position that first day, not because she'd spotted him, but because she was afraid of being watched, suspected, discovered. She wasn't Heinrich Müller's willing daughter. She was his victim. And those children in the locket were her leverage for compliance. Do you have the shot? Anna's voice crackled through the radio. Dmitri watched Greta stand slowly, touching her bruised cheek. The German officers were giving her final instructions, probably threatening those children if she didn't comply. Dmitri. Anna's voice was urgent now. Take the shot. His finger found the trigger. Everything he'd been trained for, everything his country needed, pointed to one action. Pull the trigger. End the threat. Save Stalingrad. But looking at Greta's face, seeing the mother's desperation there, the quiet courage of someone protecting her children at any cost, Dmitri made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He turned his rifle toward the German officers. The first shot took down the Wehrmacht captain before he could react. The second and third dropped his companions before they could draw weapons. In the silence that followed, Greta looked up at the cathedral ruins where muzzle flashes had revealed Dmitri's position. For the second time, their eyes met across an impossible distance. This time, he didn't hesitate. 3 days later, Dmitri found Greta in an abandoned church, tending to wounded Soviet soldiers. She'd defected completely, bringing medical supplies and intelligence that would save dozens of lives. The children in the locket were safe in Switzerland, evacuated by the resistance network she'd been secretly supporting. Why? She asked when he approached. Her English was accented but clear. Why did you spare me? Because, Dmitri said, settling his rifle against the wall. Sometimes the most courageous thing a soldier can do is refuse to shoot. They worked together through the night, her medical training and his field experience combining to save lives instead of taking them. As dawn broke over Stalingrad's ruins, they shared stories. Her childhood in Berlin before the war. His medical studies in Moscow. The dreams they'd abandoned when the world went mad. After the war, Greta said quietly, I want to see those summer skies you described. After the war, Dmitri replied, I'd like to show them to you. It would be 18 months before they could keep that promise. 18 months of brutal fighting, of separation, of not knowing if the other had survived. But they did survive. Both of them. War ended, finally, in May 1945. Dmitri found Greta in a displaced persons camp outside Munich, working as a translator for Allied forces. She was thinner than he remembered, marked by everything she'd endured. But her eyes still held that same warm summer blue that had stopped his finger on the trigger 3 years before. You came back, she whispered when she saw him. I promised I would. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony in Moscow. Anna Kozlova was Dmitri's best man. The war had taught them all that traditional roles mattered less than loyalty and love. The children from the locket, Maria and Klaus, joined them the following year. A family forged not by blood, but by the choice to see humanity even in war's darkest moments. But their story wasn't unique. Across Europe, in the ruins of cities and the silence of battlefields, other soldiers were making similar choices. Refusing to let war destroy their capacity for mercy. Choosing love over hatred, hope over despair. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't about who you kill. It's about who you choose to save.